I hope your weekend went well and that the week ahead looks amazing for you too. So, my name is Misha. I'm just a woman who suffered with almost all of these diseases and disorders above. I thought my life was over at 57, 58 years old. I didn't think I would live to see 70, and that was devastating to me because I have a lot I want to do in this life. Now, that's not my life now. And part of that is because I got my blood pressure under control. When I started this whole journey, it was to get my diabetes under control and hopefully drop some weight for a surgery that I needed to have. And as a result, all this other stuff started getting better. And I started looking into why did I make one simple change and have everything in my health start changing when I had done so many complicated, crazy things for years, including medications to try and get it all under control, and nothing else worked. I was mind blown. And so I started diving in and learning more about this thing for my own health at first. And then I was like, you know what? If this is my story, it's somebody else's story too. What everybody needs to know is that there are billions and billions of us in the world, and we all share similar stories in some ways. So if it's happened to you, it's likely that it's happened to someone else. So I'm here to share what I'm finding so that you don't have to struggle like I did for years and worry and wait and wonder what's going on. So let's dive in. I want to talk about heart disease this morning. Now, on Friday, somebody asked me about subventricular tachycardia. And so I have some answers on that. How insulin resistance is related to that, to things like cardiomyopathy, atherosclerosis. But we're going to start with how this is causing high blood pressure, because there are different things with each one of those heart disorders. But one thing that most all, like 80% of heart disorders have in common is a long-term high blood pressure or hypertension. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like a blood pressure that's 130 over 80 or higher, and that's happening consistently. That's hypertension, and that when you start to see those numbers, that means you need to pay attention. So we're going to get a calculation in a little bit to tell you both your risk for hypertension and insulin resistance, and we're just going to dive into go over all of these things. I do want to stop in. I realized this weekend I haven't talked a lot about insulin resistance, what it is, what the signs and symptoms are. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll go into depth about some of the ways you can tell if you're insulin resistant. If we have time, we can do it today. But I think it's really important to understand that 93% of us, 93%, according to scientific studies, there was a study published in, I believe it was 2022, that in 2018, a study said that 88% of us were insulin resistant. And then just 4 years later, it said that 93% of us, have a metabolic disorder or are suffering with a metabolic disorder. And at the root of all of that is insulin resistance. Now, when we look at high blood pressure, 95% of high blood pressure is linked to insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is a pretty big piece. I'm going to go over how to get over it later, and how I got my blood pressure down and got off of 13 different medications. Way simpler than anybody ever would have told me. But let's start understanding first. In it, nuts and bolts, insulin resistance is really glucose dysregulation, meaning we have a difference in how our body wants to metabolize glucose. Insulin, by the way, is a hormone that regulates your glucose or your energy uptake when you're eating. Glucagon is the hormone that comes out and deals with it when you're not bringing in sugar and glucose into the system. And so it's telling your body to burn fat for fuel. Two different things, right? But they work on the same side, on different sides of our metabolism. But insulin resistance has been being driven, according to scientists, because we're being told to eat every 2 hours. And our metabolism doesn't like that and doesn't want that. So what it does do, I'm going to drink my tea right now, guys, because I need it this morning. So what eating every 2 hours does do is start setting you up to be more insulin dependent. And insulin is an amazing hormone for us when it's in the right amounts in our system. When we're having too much insulin in our system all the time because we have too much energy to deliver all the time, then that starts to become what we call insulin resistance. Basically, a majority of the cells are starting to shut down to the clues from insulin that's just transporting that energy. And now they don't want to answer to insulin, so they don't open up and the energy doesn't go in the cell. But it also causes problems with other hormones like thyroid hormones and sex hormones when this whole insulin resistance is going on. All right. Too much food, too often, foods that are highly refined, all of that's what's causing insulin resistance. At the base of it is a lack of nutrients and a lack of fiber to be able to deal with those. So we're going to go over all of that. How does all of that make insulin resistance? Well, when some of those cells are starting to be resistant to insulin, saying, I'm not going to take in the energy you're delivering because I'm overwhelmed and I can't answer the door for you anymore. There are other cells that are like these little party kids, and they're like, I want to take it all. You knock on my door, bring me more, bring me more. I need more of that. So the sum of those cells are called that take up too much in this weird word called insulin resistance are your endothelium. Your endothelium are the innermost lining of your blood vessels. So in this in this area, what we want to think about is if the endothelium are taking in too much energy, there's just too much going on with them, then they start to thicken up. They're growing more rapidly than other cells. And so they're getting thicker. So you have a membrane, just think of it like a membrane that's like this, and all of a sudden it's like this. Well, we're doing that on the inside of a blood vessel, right? So now we have a blood vessel that's nice and open. Thank you for all the loves and the gifts, and with a normal endothelium. But as that endothelium starts to thicken, the size inside the blood vessel gets smaller. Now there's less space for your blood to flow through, and your blood pressure is naturally going to go up because of thickened endothelium, because insulin resistance has spurned too much growth or too much energy into those cells. Side note, the endothelium is also your blood-brain barrier, and when it's dysfunctioning, it's not getting enough of the nutrients in to your brain, as well as causing this heart pressure problem. So understand that this thickened endothelium plays a role in a lot of things. We're going to go over another one here in a minute. Well, let's just do it now. The endothelium also produces a substance called nitric oxide. So if you know somebody who's had blood pressure problems and they have nitrogen pills around or to help get their heart going again, it's because it's mimicking what we're doing with nitric oxide. Now, the endothelium produces that nitric oxide, and what nitric oxide does is it allows those blood vessels to relax so blood can go through. But when the endothelium are so thick and overladen, they're not producing enough of that nitric oxide. And now you have blood vessels that are smaller and they just can't open up. They're a little bit stiffer. So that's two of the areas that this is causing the problem. Okay, so causing the endothelium to be thicker, causing the endothelium to be dysfunctioning and not produce enough of that nitric oxide. So now thicker cells, thicker blood vessels, and they can't relax. But yet you have times when you're excited. You have times when like maybe the dawn phenomenon hits in and your heart's pumping faster. So that means the pressure is going to continue to go up. But then we got to go down to the kidneys and how insulin affects the kidneys. So the kidneys produce something called aldosterone, and that regulates the sugar level, or not the sugar, the salt level in our system. This is why you're being told to cut out the salt with a cardiovascular diet, because they're trying to reduce this factor. You think about in the body where there's salt, there's going to be water. So increased salt retention means increased water retention. Now you start to see edema and you start to see some of those other disorders happening, but you also have increased volume of liquid trying to pour through your blood vessels. So again, number 3 now, vessels that are smaller, vessels that are tighter, and more liquid trying to push through those vessels. Um, so what was way number 4? 4 and 5. Well, 5 has to do with cholesterol. So we're going to go there. So, oh, that's right, cortisol. Cortisol. We're going to talk about cortisol because when you have insulin resistance is bidirectional with many other hormones in the body. Cortisol is one. A high level of cortisol will raise your insulin level. In short term, that's not a bad thing. There's some really great reasons why that can happen. But if that blood pressure is raised or the heart rate is raised all the time, the cortisol is raised all the time, and your insulin resistance or your insulin is raised all the time as a result, you're becoming more insulin resistant, and some of these other cues are starting to happen. Well, insulin also, so if cortisol is increased, insulin is going to increase, right? But what if by dietary or whatever, you're increasing your insulin levels? What happens to cortisol? Well, cortisol is also going to go up in response to the insulin going up. Now we start to have a problem. When cortisol is risen all the time, it's putting you in a constant state of fight or flight. So your heart is actually pumping harder all the time when you have this little bit of cortisol increase. And that again is causing the problem. So tighter blood vessels that can't open up, too much volume of liquid behind them, and a heart that's pumping that volume with more force. And those are 4 big ways your blood pressure is going up. The 5th way, and we're going to get to the calculation, is all about cholesterol. So you guys, I love when you ask questions. And if any of this, if you need me to slow down or explain anything, I'm happy to. Just let me know where you need clarification because this is about you getting information. So this last way we're going to talk about with blood pressure happens to be cholesterol. And so we're always focusing on the LDL pattern in our blood work, right? You guys all get blood work. Hopefully you get annual. And there's a whole array of tests they're giving you that give you a lot of idea that if you look at it could give you a good idea. Good morning, positive. It could give you a good idea if you may be becoming insulin resistant. But one of the biggest calculations we're going to find in your lipid panel. So you want to go down to where your fats are in your panel. And you want to look at that and look at the triglyceride and high density lipoprotein or HDL numbers in your labs and write them down. So you're like, what about the LDL? Isn't the LDL the bad thing? Well, that's what we've been told, but it's really not the best indicator for your heart disease or insulin resistance. What is an indicator in the LDL is the size of the LDL. And what most of us don't know, I didn't know, was that LDL actually has 2 different sizes. A really large buoyant type, it looks like it's like a beach ball, right? And then a really small dense type that's more like a golf ball. So when they're produced in balance, they each have an action in the bloodstream. We're going to focus on the small density ones because the large the type A don't really cause a lot of problems in our system for these purposes. The type B, those small dense ones, they normally go into the bloodstream and they'll hit little pockets and kind of clog up and help heal. We need those fats in our bloodstream. There's a lot of healing work and construction work that goes built out of those fats. Now, what happens is just like the insulin, just like the cortisol, just like anything else, when we have too much, then they start to cause problems and they start to cause a buildup in your blood vessels. And in Houston, we have another problem. We're starting to get little blockages or areas of built up LDL type B. Insulin resistance cues your body to produce more type B LDL. So that calculation, you got your triglyceride number or a pen and paper just to write this calculation down. By the way, in my TikTok, under the How to Tell tab, this calculation is there if you need to go find it later. And this comes from both Dr. Ben Bickman and the NIH, National Institutes of Health. Okay, so what you want to do is take your triglyceride number and divide it by your HDL number. Um, and it doesn't, I'm not really concerned about what the numbers are right now. I just want you to have the triglyceride number, the HDL number, divide the triglycerides by the HDL, and the resulting number should be below 1.5. If it's below 1.5, you're likely in a healthy state, at a less risk for heart disease or insulin resistance. Um, but 1.5 is kind of like the cap. I've seen people with numbers that are down around zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6. Their lipid panels are so amazing, it's just unreal. But when you get between 1.5 and 2, now we have an indication that this body's becoming insulin resistant, and we should probably start to address whatever's causing that to go on, not just for the insulin resistance and all of this, but for the health of your heart. But once it gets to over 2, over 3, especially if it's over 3, Houston, we have a problem. This problem needs to be addressed. The problem is called insulin resistance. And if you want to keep your heart healthy and you're linked to this insulin resistance piece, then you've got to address the insulin resistance to get the heart healthier. And it's easy. You guys, it's so, so easy. We're going to go over that in a minute. This is not some big complicated chart of all of these supplements you have to take and all of this stuff you have to do and yada, yada, yada. It's easy. I reversed my hypertension. I had been suffering with hypertension since my mid to late 20s. And by the age of 59, it was completely reversed with no medications. I had been being cycled on and off medications since my 20s. So for over 30 years, I had been having doctors give me different types of medication in different doses in combination with different things to try and get that blood pressure down. The first time I went to the emergency room, I was about 36 years of age. I was in school to become a medical assistant. We were doing our blood pressure. My blood pressure was consistently high. I had a blood pressure cuff, a blood pressure scope, a stethoscope, and I still have them. I still use them because I used them daily for years when I worked. But I take my own blood pressure, and it was like 180. It was actually over 180. It was around 200, over 160, and I was scared, like terrified. So I called my daughter. I had her come get me because I didn't want to drive to the hospital in that condition. I was dizzy. I was all the things, right? I get there and they're like, no way your blood pressure is that high. They took me into a room. They sat me down. They did my blood pressure. The nurse did my blood pressure 3 times in a row, different and switching arms. And every time it came back at least 180 over 150, I think was the lowest it came back. Her eyes popped out of her head. All of a sudden, a wheelchair was there and they're whisking me back to a room to figure it out. It didn't stop. That was at age 36, and that was my life until age like 58, 59. And how did all of that change at 58 years old of age? I just started addressing the insulin resistance. Now, I want to talk, if I can, a little bit about a couple of things. The subventricular tachycardia, the SVT. Now, I'm not going to remember this one, but I have the research pulled up, so I'm going to go over that. For the person who asked, if you're here today, I want you to understand this. Insulin resistance, I've gone over many, many times in the last few weeks, how insulin resistance is causing inflammation in your cells and oxidative stress. That oxidative stress has a key part to play in the SVT, and it links back to insulin resistance. So yes, even SVT can be linked to insulin resistance, as well as cardiomyopathies, atherosclerosis. So let me look at this again. So what's happening is insulin resistance is changing how the mitochondria work in your cells. Mitochondria are little organelles or little organs that tell your body how to use energy. They're like the powerhouses inside the cell creating the energy. When they're not working right, when they're sick, your energy goes down, or when they're overworking, your energy is up and you have oxidative stress that's causing problems throughout the body. That's where cardio or this SVT starts. So, what's happening with SVT and insulin resistance is, and again, I'm going to read the research so I can get this right. It's associated with increased oxidative stress with insulin resistance and this endoplasmic reticulum stress. Don't need to worry about it. Just understand that this is causing it. And that endoplasmic reticulum stress can lead to an increase in intracellular calcium inside the cell. Okay. So the excess calcium uptake by the mitochondria then results in that calcium overload in the cell and the opening of mitochondrial permeability, and that causes dysfunction and the cells start to break down. Now, all of that linked together, the cellular metabolism, the signaling inside the cells, all of that changes gene expression. Hyper or too much blood sugar, too much blood fats, and oxidative stress and inflammation. These derangements start to disrupt the normal electrical conduction system of the heart, causing arrhythmias. Big, long thing. What you need to know, bottom line, is that through this process of oxidative stress, insulin resistance can affect your heart rhythms. Is that I hope that's simple enough, and I hope that's answering for somebody um, a little bit about this. And the whole reason why we go into that big long thing is so you can understand that you don't have to suffer with that. Start to get the insulin resistance under control. You could start to see help with your heart. It's why we have a cardiologist up in, I always say Wisconsin, but is it Michigan, who prescribes this to every single one of his patients, the system I'm going to talk about. Every single one of his patients, cardiologist, thriving business, and he tells every single patient to do the same system I'm doing because he's seen how it works for their heart. So let's go over that. Did anybody want to talk about atherosclerosis, cardiomyopathy? I do want to talk about cardiomyopathy a little bit, and because it's interesting to me. There are different types of cardiomyopathy, but the cardiomyopathy that seems to be linked to insulin resistance the most has to do with when the heart can't compress as heavily as it should to pump the blood. We start to have this myopathy, right? So Dr. Ahmed, Ahmed, and he actually has a video. One of my videos in my playlist is from him. If you would like, I can get his video where he talks about insulin resistance and this and put it back up so you can see who he is. He's not the only one. We have neurologists, we have oncologists, we have endocrinologists who are now recommending the system. Understand the science for the system has been out for about 20, a little over 20 years, more than 20 years. I should say way more than 20 years. But it was just put together as a protocol about 3 years ago. And so you started 3 to 4 years ago. And so you start hearing about it now, and we're starting to get the word out now. And that's why most people haven't heard about it for a number of reasons. And I can go over that. So yeah, I will absolutely get it up. Let me make a note though to myself, so I'll remember to do that, because it's usually a couple of hours before I leave here and I can get to the he actually has been on my live a couple of times to talk about the system. So yeah, we'll get that done. Now, with cardiomyopathy, the kind we're talking about, what seems to happen with insulin resistance is all this excess water, all this excess pressure inside the heart is stretching the heart muscle out. So if you think about, just for simplistic terms, let's think about a balloon. When you get a balloon and you go to blow it up, it's nice and firm and tight, and maybe it takes a little bit to get the balloon started because that membrane is nice and firm, right? And elastic. But you blow that balloon up and multiple times, right? All of a sudden, the elasticity starts to go out of the balloon, and the balloon starts to fill up much easier, and it's just not quite as firm of a balloon. It's happening to our heart. Our heart, with insulin resistance and all this excess pressure inside the heart, can cause the heart to stretch out, and now the muscles of the heart, and it just doesn't contract as well. So that one is called, actually, let me go to Dr. Bickman's book. That one is called dilated cardiomyopathy, where the heart's ballooned out. So that one seems to be the one linked to insulin resistance. But I hope you guys can see. Here's the thing: if the system I'm going to talk about right now, has a 90-day money back guarantee, and if you did it for 90 days and your blood pressure started going down, you started having these things happen to get better, would it be worth it? My blood pressure fluctuated. It didn't, let's all honesty, like all my blood pressure was not normal in 3 months. Okay. It was not like, oh, I had, let's see, I said in my 30s to my 50s, almost 60. So around 30 years of high blood pressure that we were struggling with did not reverse in 90 days. It did not. I doubt that anyone else's would either. It took me about a year for that blood pressure to really normalize and level out. Now, what did happen was in the first week that I started on this protocol that I'm going to talk about, I happened to have a doctor's appointment to go over some labs or some other things because I was in the doctor's office at least twice a month, every month for a long time because I was so sick. But I went in and my blood pressure, the lowest that was ever charted in my chart, was 150 over 110. On this day I go in, I'd been doing the protocol for 6 days. The MA took my blood pressure and it was like 80, 84 over 76, somewhere in that. No, I'm sorry, 124 over 76, something like that. And it was, I'll have to go back and look, but it wasn't normal, but it was so close to normal for the first time in over 30 years that I screamed in the doctor's office like a little girl. She and we actually used to be Golden Girls together. We shared a house together. We worked at multiple different clinics together. But she came in and I'm like, "Did you look at my chart?" Because she knew my history. And she goes, "No, not yet. What?" And I said, "Look at my blood pressure." And she saw the number from the blood pressure, made the medical assistant come back in and do my blood pressure again. It remained about the same. It's going to fluctuate just a little, but it remained about the same. And she looked at me and said, "What did you do?" She had been working with me for years trying to get my blood pressure down, knowing that if we didn't, my heart was just literally, for all intents and purposes, going to explode one day. That cardiomyopathy was probably my future or worse. Okay. Um, so it did come down, but it didn't stay down because I had to work through all of this buildup of the things that I talked about. Your endothelium don't just thin out and become normal within a few weeks or a few months. All of that plaques and stuff that are built up in there didn't start to clear out immediately, but it did happen. So one of the things I caution people against is this quick fix mentality where we want to take 20, 30, 40 years of damage and reverse it in a week. That's not going to happen in a healthy way for you guys. So understand that part. Okay. So if we understand insulin resistance causes this, at the beginning of this whole chat, I talked about how insulin resistance is caused by us eating too often, eating too many refined carbs and boxed and packaged foods, but that seems to be the life for most of us. What are we going to do? Plus, we add in the fact that with our diet today, It's not just the boxed and bagged foods, but our raw organic foods are very different. Really hard to get in the variety of fibers that we need to deal with the carbs that we eat in a raw organic diet. Plus, they've stripped out fibers. There's a reason our foods used to be small and dense, a little bit bitter and really crunchy, because they were full of fiber. Now they're big, 2 to 3, sometimes 5 times more the size of what a normal organic food, fruit, vegetable should be. And it's juicy and it's plump and it's kind of sweet. That's because fiber has been stripped out. Sweetness goes up, um, juiciness goes up when fiber is removed. So when we have fiber present in the foods, they're going to be a little bit snappier, crunchier, and a little bit more bitter. But we didn't want that. We wanted bigger, juicier, plumper. And as a result, we increased our sugar intake. So if we understand that, we can start to understand how we can reverse this. How do I feel about seed oils? Possibly, absolutely. I hate seed oils. So, and it's funny you asked that, because one of the problems with heart disease, and which one was it? Is it cardiomyopathy? No, it's atherosclerosis. So the atherosclerosis has been linked more to insulin resistance and having a high level of these seed oils that have a lot of linoleic acid that are causing more oxidative stress and whatnot in the system. I know you guys, just in a nutshell, I've been really starting to try and track more. It takes me a while. I got a lot going on, but I have been like, okay, it's really time to start getting your own health dialed in, Misha, and that means you need to start paying attention to what foods are causing you to feel ill, and start working those out of your system. Well, one we've known for a while, one food that causes me to have almost immediate inflammation in my joints, headaches, body aches and pains, intense gastrointestinal distress, is anytime I get a hold of a food that's been prepared in a seed or a nut oil. I can tell right away. And it's gotten bad enough now that bad enough, good enough. If I eat sugar, like refined sugar a lot now, I will notice that the times I have urgency and the gastrointestinal distress is on the back of having not just like a bagel or something, but a sugar food. I get like, just, I have to be married to the bathroom for a while because it's so devastating to my system. But seed oils can cause a lot of inflammation because of the linoleic acids in them, and it's not an oil I have in my house at all. In my house, I have some olive oil. That's a little bit of olive oil I need to use up. I have butter, and I have coconut oil. Those are the 3 oils I keep in my house. Now, I use avocado for fats when I'm doing protein shakes and stuff, or just to add to a meal, to add healthy fats that also have some fiber in it if I'm eating a whole avocado. But yeah, I am not a proponent of seed oils. I would love to know why you asked that question and what you've heard. But seed oils can be really devastating to, yeah. So TK421 said A1C was 5.5. So kind of towards, they've been dropping the A1C number for a while, and I honestly actually feel like we're going to get to a day where they say the cap for prediabetes is about 5.3 to 5.5. Currently it's been around 5.7. If you hit that and go over that, then you're considered pre-diabetic. So his A1C was 5.5. A1C, by the way, is an over time, about a 3-month period of time, picture of what your blood sugars have done. It's not a moment in time. It's a length of time. Part of the reason we do 90 days for blood work is for the A1C. So you can see what your A1C is today. Do the system for 90 days. Do your A1C in 90 days and see what that 3-month picture while you're on the system looks like, and it should get better. But A1C was 5.5 for almost 5 years, and then started avoiding all seed oils. And after 2 years, it fell to 5.0. So you guys, the protocol I do, Melba, I didn't catch the yes, please. I know it was probably like, was it atherosclerosis? I asked if you wanted me to go over because that's the only one I haven't. So let me know which one it was. And I will be happy to go over that for you, hun. Um, so along with this whole thing that I do of adding in fibers, adding in nutrients, I do pay attention to keeping seed oils out of my system. And at first I was like, okay, let's keep them out of my house. But then as I've gone through and every once in a while, I'm human. Every once in a while I go, I'm like, I just want to stop someplace and get something to eat. And if it's like some of my guilty pleasures from before, from 3 years ago when I started this, were like Popeyes or Chick-fil-A. Don't come at me. I know Chick-fil-A has 50 something chemicals in it. Popeyes or Chick-fil-A, one or the other, where like I love chicken, right? What I notice now is either one of those, heavy in seed oils and fried in them, I will within an hour have intense gastrointestinal distress from introducing that oil into your body. Now, while we're on seed oils and all of this, understand that the linoleic acid in those seed oils can stay in your system for 600 days. So where other foods like sugar, unless you're taking in too much and it's storing in your fat cells or whatever, but it cycles in and out of your system pretty quickly, hours, maybe a day or so. But linoleic acids hang around causing inflammation in your system for up to 600 days after you ate them. So for me, I know it's not quite 2 years, but I think about, man, if I put this in my face, do I want to know that I'm going to have to fight the effects of the inflammation it's going to cause for 2 years? Not for one day or for 1 week and I'll feel better. 2 years that linoleic acid can hang around and cause disruption in your insulin, in your inflammation, and all of that. So, yeah, absolutely. And by the way, TK421, amen. I am so glad that you got that figured out and that worked for you because it is a big piece of what I talk about. I have 6 simple tips that I love for people to utilize in this whole thing. And they're fiber first, prioritize protein, don't fear fats, and fuel with fats or fill with fats, but those saturated monounsaturated fats is what I'm talking about. So olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter, ghee, duck fat, lard, animal fats. That's where our fats should be coming from. And those fats are not making you fat or causing um, Ahmed. Oh, the Dr. Ahmed. Okay, so yeah, I'll put a video up from him. Um, and he's an amazing doctor. Now, when we look at Doctor on YouTube, Dr. Pradeep talks about a lot of the same information I'm talking about. And again, he's another cardiologist. He doesn't talk about the system, but all of the premises that I'm talking about with heart disease and insulin resistance. Dr. Pradeep, who has a big YouTube channel, talks about it all the time. So, 2 cardiologists right off the top of my head that absolutely love this way of life. Okay, so fiber, protein, fats, and then limit your carbs. So as I'm finding out, like you guys, I bought last month, I bought a couple of bags of like keto chocolate or paleo chocolate, so way less carbohydrates, super dark chocolate. But even that, I'm finding that I'm very sensitive to. So this weekend, we just went through my house and we're like, there's not a lot of sugar in my house, but any of the sugar that was left, I either like took it to my daughter-in-law or somebody or threw it out because it was just causing so much ill health. Now that I'm getting my body cleaner from all those other things, when I reintroduce one thing that's bad, I notice it right away. Okay, so this is again, this is about living a real life, though, not about making people be restricted and doing something crazy that they just can't sustain. Um, what about dairy? Dairy's interesting, right? So, um, I know a lot of people have a hard time dealing with dairy. I know there's a lot of people that say dairy is horrible for you. But what I'll tell you for me, and this is where I think I would love this tribe to be a little different than everyone else, is understand that your body, outside of these basic needs, your body is going to react to different foods differently. So I seem to do well with dairy and cheese and all of that stuff. It doesn't, I've paid attention, when I eat a food with the cheese and stuff on it, or when I eat a food without it, it doesn't seem to be that much different for me. Now, too much dairy, but I'm not talking about that I eat a lot. Too much would probably cause me some gas and bloating and whatnot. Um, when we start looking at things like almond milk and um like any coconut milk that's in a carton and not in a can, I don't like. A lot of those have a high sugar content. um they're just, even oat milk, they're just much more sugary than um cow's milk. And so, I mean, if you want a different alternative to cow's milk, then absolutely try goat or sheep's milk. And you might be able to, yep, blood type related. So I am a type O positive, and so I'm highly carnivoristic. Like, you guys, my meals yesterday, I did have, oh my God, I made this crazy sandwich. It was so good, but I need to find a better way to fix it. I had a croissant left over. My grandson had a croissant, so I made him his morning ham and cheese croissant that he loves so much. I did one with a couple of poached eggs, some brie, which is goat's or sheep's milk. I can never remember. Honestly, I love the taste, but I'm not a brie aficionado. Put a little bit of homemade huckleberry preserves from North Idaho, and crazy enough, a little bit of hollandaise sauce, all on this croissant with, but lots of protein in there. It was yum. That was what I ate for breakfast. We did have some orange slices, and I had some raspberries after breakfast with that. But then my second meal of the day was a huge chicken breast stuffed with jalapeno popper stuffing and wrapped in bacon. Um, no, I didn't eat a lot of vegetables yesterday. And you know what? I woke up feeling amazing this morning. But that's my body. Some people may need more vegetables. I tend to do better on a carnivoristic diet. I'm not like who is it, Michaela Peterson, who eats only strip steak. That's not me, but I don't have her autoimmune disorders and all of that. So I think that you need to eat what fuels your body and makes you feel the best, not feel the best up here. Not like, oh, that Oreo cookie made me feel good, but like what's contributing to your health, to your energy, all of that. Diagnose. Oof. Okay, so PCOS. Let's talk about that really quick, okay? There are a number of women who have done the system who, let's back up the truck a second. PCOS, some of these metabolic scientists are now saying, and Dr. Ben Bickman being one, and Dr. Ben wrote this, like, it's a best-selling book, Why We Get Sick. He calls PCOS and erectile dysfunction metabolic infertility. And at the basis of the metabolic infertility is this thing called insulin resistance. Dr. Ben did have a part in producing the protocol that I'm talking about. But in order, and I can do the PCOS talk later this week if you would like. But PCOS is really just insulin resistance and maybe a genetic switch in your body that got flipped because of the insulin resistance. But if you get the insulin resistance under control, your periods can become more normal. And I explain that in depth, and I'll do it in a video if you need me to this week in a live, how it's interfering with your hormones and your whole cycle, and how getting the insulin under control can solve all of that for you. But I've had girls, because that's gotten better, because the periods normalized, because their hormones got better, because all of those stages of the eggs have gotten normalized by without the interference of insulin resistance. They've started families. A couple of them have children that are at least 2 years old now. I keep forgetting how long it's been, but there's a lot of relief from women with PCOS. I had PCOS, but I'm menopausal. It looks a little different for me at this end. And why? Because PCOS is still just insulin resistance. So a lot of the same symptoms you're going to find with insulin resistance and PCOS, but get the PCOS under control and you can get your insulin resistance under control. Now, you use canola oil, olive oil, and butter, and I would drop the canola oil. It's highly inflammatory, according to these doctors. Okay, so look, all I do is this tea every morning. And why this tea? It's high in vitamins and minerals. It has antioxidant properties. It has anti-cancer properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties. So all of that oxidative stress that I talked about coming from insulin resistance, this starts to help deal with that. But it also has, besides all of that, it has these components in it that can help with the brain function. Chlorogenic acids are one of those few components that can cross through the endothelium, get to the brain, and affect our brain. Our brain needs some sugar or some carbohydrate as in glucose. Let's see. Let me back up my truck and correct myself right now, because it's not carbohydrate or sugar. It's just the glucose that the brain needs. The brain also needs carbohydrates. So healthy fats and carbohydrates or glucose that's coming from whole foods, your brain can start to function better too. But also, yeah. So the tea, that's where we're at. So this, you guys, there's a phone number on Facebook and on TikTok. Just go to my profile. I've changed it up a little bit, you guys. I realized I lost track of being able to just connect with people. And it's just as important to me that you get answers and get better. So there's a way in there for you to connect with me, and then I can share the protocol with you and the links and how to get it and all of that stuff. Is Crisco in a can a seed oil? Crisco in a can is worse than all of that. It's a highly refined oil. Crisco was originally not meant to be a food product, but because it's made out of what we typically call food, they can market it as a food. But it's highly processed. If you were to smell or see Crisco before it was bleached, it's actually bleached, and then it has a perfume added to it to make it so that you won't throw the can out the second you open it up. It's that toxic. I would just not use Crisco. If you need something for that kind of fat, use the rendered fat from your bacon. Keep that fat around. If you strain it, put it in the fridge, you can reuse that as an oil. You can use duck fat or lard or ghee. But yeah, I wouldn't do the only oils that I really use that are like canned or bottled are those three: avocado, extra virgin. The light olive oil I used to get thinking, oh, it's a better version. It's a seed oil with a little bit of olive oil in it. That's how it's light. So yeah, the olive oil is going to cost you a little bit more to get it in the dark bottle, the really high quality olive oil, but your body will do so much better without all those toxins being put in it. Okay, so this tea that I drink in the morning, and then I drink this. And I'm going to be doing some more videos on these, you guys. I realize I've gotten so far into the science, I haven't been giving you guys enough of the solution. So this, I have one. I will have my breakfast here in a little bit because I've been now fasting for, gosh dang it, 15 and a half hours. So I will have this. I'm trying to switch my eating window to the morning. That's a whole other topic. But this, 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers, those phytosterols, which are actually feeding the gut microbiome, helping you have a more healthy microbiome in there and getting some of the yeast and stuff knocked back. But it also has vitamins and minerals in it that are aimed for metabolism. I was listening to Thomas DeLauer, another scientist who's also a fitness enthusiast, talk about fiber this weekend. So I'm going to do a little bit more research into fiber and give you guys some answers on a little more in-depth answers on fiber later this week. But what we do know, and what I've always known, is that the fiber I use has two different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. Now, the insoluble is kind of like a broom cleaning you out. That's great, a great component to have in there. But there's another reason we want this combination of fibers. The second type of fiber is the soluble fiber. Now, soluble fiber soaks up water when it gets in your gut and starts to expand. So as it expands, you start to feel fuller longer. But as that expands and gels up and you eat food and put it in there, now it's naturally slowing down, which is what our food should have always been doing, the delivery of that energy into our system. So I call it like a time release. Instead of it just going straight through you, having this huge sugar spike and a huge insulin spike, now those sugars are passing through in a more released manner that's not spiking the blood sugar, so the insulin doesn't have to come up as high, and then the insulin can come down quicker because it was never driven as high or as long. So that's what I do: a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. I told you what I ate yesterday. Today, what did I? Oh, you know what I did yesterday that I didn't mention? I had gotten some they're like a little crispy cookie with some peanut butter on top and fudge over that. My grandson loves them, but we've been talking so much about health at 7 years old. He's so good. But I had a couple of those cookies after breakfast, and immediately the rest of the day, it was like, keep the bathroom door open. I got to go. And it was bad. But that much between the seed oils and the sugars in those couple of cookies, and it was just a couple, I realized how toxic they are. So we're actually just leaning more on fruits and whole meats in this family now as a result. And the more I talk about my health, the more he wants to be healthy. Isn't that amazing? How we can be a model for our family. We can either teach them to go down the wrong path. My mom and my auntie, who was an RN, used to believe the old food pyramid, and so grains and all of that were on the bottom. I remember going to my auntie's house, bless her soul, rest her soul, I should say, and her kids would be having apple pie and ice cream for breakfast. She's like, what? They're getting in grains, they're getting in fruits, they're getting in a little bit of dairy, and they're avoiding those devils of fats and red meats, right? So now it's interesting that that food pyramid has been turned on its head, and those fats and those proteins from animal meats happen to be the basis of what we should be eating, and those grains and stuff are at the very tippity top of the things we should be limiting. But that's the upbringing I had, was eating the exact opposite way. So now we're breaking that cycle in the family. I want you guys to know you can do it too. Insulin resistance is just this. It's the precursor. Let's talk about that first. And we're going to go over insulin resistance in depth tomorrow. But insulin resistance is the precursor to prediabetes and diabetes. Even if you've never had your blood sugars tested, and I'm not diabetic, I'm not pre-diabetic, you're likely insulin resistant if you have these symptoms up above, especially if you have a blood pressure that's 130/80 or higher. That tells me that you're insulin resistant. Number one. Okay. But what it is it's a dysfunction of the hormone insulin in your body, derived because of a glucose or sugar dysregulation, meaning it's not well regulated and there's just too much of it in our system. So we eat foods that turn into glucose in our system too quickly, which demands insulin. Insulin is a transport hormone that takes that, it's one of the jobs, but it takes that energy in the form of glucose after we've eaten and delivers it to the cells. Where we get to insulin resistance is because we're doing this too often all the time. So we're being told to eat every 2 hours, and that's one of the worst things you could do for your metabolism ever. Partana olive oil, great suggestion. So Melba over on Facebook said Partana olive oil is good, a little pricey, but good. Look, you don't have to use that much oil to cook anything. And so why not cook with what's not going to cause you to have to buy hundreds of dollars of medication. Okay, so you don't think you're insulin resistant. Do you get headaches? Do you have body aches and pains? Are you craving sugars and salts all the time? Are you thirsty a lot? Um, do you get leg cramps? Do you have PCOS or any of the, if you're telling me you have a number of these things here, then I have to break the news to you. You're likely insulin resistant. One thing, one thing that links to all of those things up there is high levels of insulin. So there is in my profile, this is my life. If you go to my profile here on TikTok, right at the top, there's those little tabs. If you go to the one that says how to tell, I give you a number of calculations. You can definitely go to your doctor and have something called the HOMA-IR, or homeostatic method of assessment for insulin resistance. Okay. It'll cost you about $30 to add it to your normal metabolic panel. But that number alone may not give you a clear picture. You can definitely have that tested. There's a calculation between your blood sugars and the HOMA-IR, where you multiply those together here in the US and then divide it by 407, and the resulting number should tell you your insulin resistance risk. And I'll also have that calculation in the how to tell part in UK numbers. So millimoles per deciliter, whatever you guys do. So there's a little bit different calculation, same resulting numbers, but the divide by part is a little different for you in the UK because the numbers are different. The other way you can tell if you're insulin resistant is to just take your current lab. This is a good indicator. If you take your current labs and you say, okay, I have my triglycerides and I have my HDL, and I divide my triglyceride by my HDL, then you should get a number that's below 1.5. Shelly, so which one? The glucose and HOMA-IR calculation, or the triglyceride and HDL calculation? So there's videos explaining how to do both calculations in my my channel list up above, where just go to how to tell. It's going to give you some those two calculations and some other ways that you can tell if it's you. So some of the top 5 ways, the glucose should be glucose times HOMA-IR divided by 407. The resulting number, I can't remember what that is, so you'll have to look at the video. That's a newer calculation for me. I just heard about it in the last couple of months. And as they do more study on insulin resistance, they're starting to figure out these ways, because they never really looked at it before. So we never really talked about it before. We never really talked about how to address it before, because it really wasn't in anybody's rear view, much less rear view mirror, much less the forward going mirror. So now we are there. Now we're there. Now we're looking at insulin resistance. Now science is starting to go, well, if insulin resistance is related to this, what does it look like when we talk about that? And if it's related to that, what does it look like when we talk about this? Science is just starting to find links, and they haven't yet explained all of the mechanisms, but there's definite links between insulin resistance and all of these things I talk about. So find those calculations and utilize those. That will help you understand. But there's 5 ways. We're going to go over again this tomorrow, but 5 ways you can tell that you might be insulin resistant. Number 1 is going to be that blood pressure. I don't care whether you're thin or fat, or you've ever had blood sugar numbers that are high, or any of that. If your blood pressure is consistently 130 over 80 or higher, consider yourself insulin resistant and start addressing it. And although I advocate for people to speak to their physician, I also advocate for you being in control of your own health. Since we understand that insulin resistance is simply a food-borne disorder, there's no medication that they can give you that's going to fix what's wrong with our diet, right? So if you know that you don't need a prescription, you don't have to have any of that, you can start to address it on your own and see if you feel better. Look, I worked for doctors, and I went to doctors for years, and not one of them helped me with this, because they didn't understand how. They weren't educated how. I started this protocol of a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. I was able to lose the 15 pounds I needed to lose for the surgery. In fact, by the time I went in, I had lost 25 pounds. I ended up losing 55 pounds from where I was. Um, I reversed my bleeding teeth and gums. I reversed some of my eyesight. These glasses used to be a 3.0. They're now a 1.75. Who does that at the age of 60? My hair started growing back in. My skin started looking better. My gastrointestinal distress stuff started getting better. My leg cramps that I used to have every single morning that woke me up in so much pain, it was unbelievable. I don't have those anymore. I don't have skin tags anymore. I don't have skin discoloration anymore. So, skin tags, skin discoloration. So, high blood pressure. If you have skin tags, you're most likely insulin resistant. And I can go over those skin issues later. If you have dark skin. I can't do it in this shirt, I don't think. Maybe I can. So my elbows and knees used to be what I call ashy. So they were dark, patchy skin, and it was like cracking around the elbows, and it would catch on shirts like this or on fabric. My elbows used to be dark and cracking, peeling all the way around the elbow, all the way down to like here. And there's none of that now. That dark skin patch is telling me that there's some insulin resistance going on, and I go over that in a whole other talk. Those are three ways: high blood pressure, skin tags, dark skin patches. The other top two ways you can tell you're insulin resistant are if you have PCOS or erectile dysfunction. Yay! So, Teat, if you purchase from me, make sure you get a hold of me, and please make sure to just ask questions, whether it's going good, whether it's not. Ask questions and let me know how I can help you. Because actually, that's the best part of my day. Besides these lives, is just helping you guys. So let's do that. And congratulations, congratulations. So those are 5 ways. Now, another way you can tell if you're insulin resistant, skinny or fat. Okay. If you have a belly that's protruding and it looks like you're pregnant, whether it's 3 months pregnant, 6 months pregnant, that's called visceral fat. And that central adiposity or central fat is a huge indicator of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance cues your body to store more fat in that central area underneath the muscle wall. And now you have a bulging belly. Even if your arms, legs, and everything else are thin, that's a huge clue that you're insulin resistant as well. And all the other things I named. Cravings, headaches, migraines, brain fog, all of that, it's all linked to insulin resistance. So, okay, so I hope that helped everybody this morning. Now, I changed it up a little bit, you guys. So if you're interested in the system, just use my link. There's a way to contact me there. I would really rather address what's going on with you. And see if this can help you in reality. So I love if you just send me a message, and if you're interested, I'm not going to be pushy, like I'm not on here. I'm just going to answer what questions I can and see if this is a good fit for you. But as you guys, it's really just a tea that I drink in the morning and a pre-meal drink that I have before anything I eat. It doesn't interfere with medications. It doesn't cause horrible adverse reactions like some of the medications do. It's so safe that we have babies who are drinking it, not the whole packet. I'm not going to say the baby's drinking the whole packet. And we have people well over 82 years old who are finding health again by doing this. I have yet to get my apple cider. I am so excited to try it. You guys, also, I admitted. I have had a soda addiction for a long time. It's the fizz in the soda. So I switched to diet sodas. Yes, I know they're damaging. Yes, I know they're inflammatory. Believe me, I have those talks all the time with myself. But there is like a dopamine trigger for me with soda. Trying to get off of that, I started using some carbonated water, and I put the Unimate in it. Does it taste the same as soda? No, but I get both things that I want, the fizz and all the goodness of this in that drink. You can do that. If you don't know that, you can do that. As long as it's not adding sugars, glucose, carbohydrates into your day, you can add some of those things to this. One of the other tricks I like with this one, and I can't wait to try it with the apple cider, is I made my own chai spices. So very clean spices. And I like to put a little bit of chai spice in this as well. Hey, Jason. So I have been thinking about you, buddy. So Jason and I met up about a year and a half ago. He was in line for medications and they wanted him to do surgery. And he was like, no, I'm not. And in the end, he's 186 pounds now. So consistency, patience, a real life, real food, just real solutions. Jason has, in a very healthy way, lost 186 pounds, but it also helped his heart rate. It also helped a lot of the depression. Look, when you're insulin resistant, can we stop making people bad for being depressed? There's what I call, so there's toxic negativity, but I feel like in a spectrum, there's also toxic positivity. There's a good place to be where you recognize what's going on in life. You're able to look at the things that have happened and accept those and work through them, right? That's part of what gives us resilience and strength and part of the human experience. But when we go and we focus on the negative all the time, that's not good. When we go and we say, you can't have a negative emotion, you got to be positive all the time, that's not good either. Insulin resistance, it's not that you can think your way out of it. Insulin resistance affects your brain and causes you to be anxious and depressed and exacerbate Alzheimer's and autism and ADHD and all of that. So Jason's overcome so much. Not that all of that was his, but depression maybe. But I just want people to not be afraid to mention it. I was terrified of my depression for years, and they said it's a chemical imbalance. It's a hormonal imbalance. Yes, it was a hormonal imbalance. It was my insulin being out of control, causing all the other stuff to happen. But Jason, you are a rock star, and I'm so happy to see you in here today. I've been wondering about you. So 186 pounds down, guys. The system just works. It's 2 real food products listed in the prescriber's digital reference, and it will change your life. And it's just these drinks that I have. I got to finish my tea this morning. And then when I do eat, I'll have this. And when I have my second meal, this cheddar broccoli stuffed. I like chicken a lot. I'll have another one, and that's it. Today I'll probably have a chopped salad with it, but because I'm trying to be an adult, trust me, it's hard for me to be an adult. Okay. The system, you can get it, just contact me, text me, text. Amazing. It's really, 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 I can't word. It's very fulfilling me to see so many people really engaged in getting their health taken care of and starting to have a real life. So, all right, guys, I'm going to head out tomorrow morning at 8:30. We're going to go more in depth about insulin resistance, what it looks like, and we're going to go about the all that works to start. The reason it always makes my heart happy to hear people who have nothing talk about the same science and the same resolutions as we talk about. So this is about insoluble and soluble fiber, and he said in the right combination of fibers, 5 grams of fiber can do much more for you than 3 or more times of single fiber. That's the gold of this combination of fibers. That combination, short chain fatty being improved gut and being your microbiome and eating a combination that's causing the magic. And so I love to get the validation from people who even that we're talking about work. So if you know more, you know, and better too. Think you want to talk, if PCOS week, I would love to dive into PCOS. I also looking back at some of my stuff from before, and I think it's time to have the kidney talk again. Is anybody friends? Insulin resistance. If you haven't like me to cover something that you haven't heard me talk about that came up today, we haven't talked. So I got a lot you can. Well, I don't know because we haven't done a talk on essential tremors. But I would love to go do some research tonight and give you some answers as to look. And here's the thing I will always say if insulin resistance relates to it. If it doesn't, I'm not going to come back and tell you it does. But if it does, believe me, I'm going to tell you because it's the simplest thing you can fix in your health is fixing your insulin resistance. For me, again, it's a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. My 7-year-old grandson who has a liposomal disorder that could shorten his life drastically. He's doing this now too because of the good that it's doing in his gut and in his intestines with his little body struggling to process fats. Crazy stuff. Okay, you guys, we'll see you in the morning. And let me write down the essential tremors before I go, or I will forget. And I'll look for that video from Dr. Ahmed and get it reposted. You guys, it will happen today, so just look for that one today from Dr. Ahmed, the cardiologist is who Dr. Ahmed is. He actually has been reaching out asking for some of us for our stories so that he can keep them for his own clinic, which is amazing that this cardiologist is taking such a proactive approach in helping people's health from a real standpoint. There's also videos in my playlist from pharmacists who have said that this is the most impactful thing they've seen come through their pharmacy or come through their field of view as far as medications go. It's not a medication, it's food, but food should be our medication, not the other stuff. We are not deficient in medications. We're deficient in nutrients, and what this does is help us get those nutrients back in. So give the system a shot. I will see you in the morning. I got to run. I've been talking too long. Always my problem. Jason, so good to see you. Melba, thanks for joining. Anna and Cheryl, thanks you guys. Again, I'll get a link for my WhatsApp and get it in here. You guys, you can, if you're in the US, you can text me at that number. If you're in Canada, just message me and I'll get you my WhatsApp so that you can contact me there without all the burden to your phone bill. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great